When people feel unsafe, they tend to reach for control, and gripping harder usually makes things worse. So I first want you to understand that detachment is not abandonment. There's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, especially with how intense life can sometimes feel, and it's this. When people feel unsafe, they reach for control. They grip harder. They worry more. They overthink more. They try to manage outcomes. They try to prevent pain. Then they try to make sure nothing bad happens. And on the surface, that can look responsible. It can even look loving. It can look like caring. But a lot of times underneath it, it's fear. And one of the biggest light bulb moments a person can have is realizing that detachment is not the same thing as not caring. That gets misunderstood all of the time. People think if they stop gripping so hard that they're giving up, if they stop trying to manage everything, they're being irresponsible, if they stop rescuing and fixing and monitoring and reminding and carrying and checking and chasing, then somehow they must be cold or selfish or uncaring. But detachment is not abandonment. Detachment is not punishment. Detachment is not becoming hard-hearted. Detachment is not that you don't care. Okay? Detachment is learning how to care without becoming emotionally trapped in that other person, in another situation or another outcome. And that's huge, right? Because when people feel unsafe, they often confuse control with love. They think, if I love enough, I can fix it. If I stay on top of it enough, I can prevent it. If I keep explaining and helping and monitoring and managing, checking and rescuing, then maybe things will be okay. And a lot of us learn that pattern honestly. We learned it because life felt chaotic. We learned it because unpredictability hurt. We learned it because instability made us hyper aware. We learned it because being vigilant felt safer than relaxing. And we learned it because letting go once felt dangerous. So I don't say any of this with judgment, but I do think one of the most healing questions a person can ask is this: where am I calling control love? Where am I calling control love? That question can change your life, because sometimes what we are calling love is actually fear. And sometimes what we are calling support is actually over-functioning. And sometimes what we are calling loyalty is actually self-abandonment. And sometimes what we are calling helping is actually interfering with reality. And the hard part is this: controlling can make us feel temporarily safer. And that's why people do it. It gives the illusion of protection. It gives the illusion of participation. It gives the illusion that we are doing something useful. But internally, it creates strain. It keeps the nervous system activated. It keeps the mind in a loop. It keeps us focused outward instead of inward. And it keeps us attached to outcomes that were never fully ours to run. And then people wonder why they feel like so exhausted. And detachment is the shift from how do I make this go the way I want to how do I stay sane, loving, and honest in the middle of what is. That's a very different way of living. And sometimes detachment is stepping back. Sometimes it means letting someone else have their own process. Sometimes it means not arguing, and sometimes it means not fixing, and sometimes it means not chasing, and sometimes it means not making another adult your emotional project. And sometimes it means not carrying something that never belonged on your back to begin with. And for many people, that feels terrifying, because if I'm not gripping, then what am I doing? right? If I'm not managing, then what keeps everything from falling apart? And if I let go, does that mean I'm weak? Does it mean I don't care? And no. It may mean you are finally allowing truth to be truth. And that is one of the hardest things for controlling people to do. To let reality be reality, to let people be who they are, to stop trying to force timing, to stop trying to control another person's lessons, to stop trying to rescue your way into peace. Because peace does not come from perfect control. Peace comes from learning what is yours and what is not. So here's a practice for this week. Ask yourself, where am I overthinking or over involved? And where am I over monitoring? Where am I over responsible? Where am I trying to protect myself by controlling something that is not truly mine to control? And then ask, what would loving detachment look like here? Not coldness, not indifference, not disappearing. Loving detachment. What would it look like to care without gripping, to be present without controlling, to let the truth without managing, or to tell the truth, without managing the response, to love someone without abandoning yourself, to stay open without taking over. And that is profound work. And I think when the world feels heavy, this becomes even more important because fear will always tempt us to grip tighter. But tighter is not always wiser, and more effort is not always healthier, and more involvement is not always more loving. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop trying to be in charge of something that was never yours to run. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is release the outcome and come back to your own mind, your own body, your own peace, and your own choices. Detachment is not abandonment. It is how we stop drowning in what we cannot run. And that is powerful. So what is mine to carry and what is not, right? So I want to talk to you about one of the simplest ideas, but also one of the hardest for people to really live. And it's this: what is mine to carry and what is not? And the question matters in relationship. It matters in families and business and health and leadership. It matters in stress. It matters when the world feels unstable. It matters in everyday life, because when life feels uncertain, people start carrying things that do not belong to them. They carry other people's emotions, other people's consequences, other people's choices, other people's moods, their healing, their timelines, other people's reactions, other people's growth, other people's responsibilities. And they do it because they care, or because they're scared, or because they were trained to. And a lot of people unconsciously live like this. It's my fault. It's my job to fix this. If I say the right thing, do the right thing, sacrifice enough, love enough, monitor enough, work hard enough, worry enough, then I can control the outcome. And that mindset is brutal. It creates guilt. It creates hypervigilance. It creates resentment. It creates burnout. It creates self-neglect. It creates a false sense of responsibility. So now, of course, in life, there are things that are ours to carry: our attitude, our actions, our boundaries, our behaviors, our honesty, our choices, our healing, our response, and that part matters. But people who feel unsafe, often they skip right past all of that and go straight into carrying everyone else's too. And that's the part that breaks them. So one of the healthiest questions a person can ask is, am I carrying my responsibility, or am I carrying theirs too? Because those are not the same thing. A lot of people have spent years carrying things that never belong to them. They carry the burden of making another person okay. They carry the burden of preventing disappointment. They carry the burden of keeping everyone calm. They carry the burden of holding the whole emotional atmosphere together. They carry the burden of not rocking the boat, or they carry the burden of making life easier for everybody else while getting further and further away from themselves. And eventually, they lose themselves. Not because they're bad, and not because they're weak, not because over carrying Or I should say, because over carrying will wear anybody down. And there's a big difference between being responsible and being over responsible. And responsible says, I will own my part. I will tell the truth. I will act with dignity. I will do what is mine to do. And over responsible says, I will carry what is mine and what is yours. I will anticipate everything. I will prevent everything. I will absorb everything. I will manage everything. I'll even keep trying until this feels okay. And that is a fast road to exhaustion. So I want to offer a shift. Instead of asking, how do I carry this better? Try asking, was this mine to carry in the first place? And that one question can bring so much clarity, because some things are yours to carry. Your peace, your truth, your boundaries, your choice, your healing, your inner state. And some things are not. Another person's honesty, another person's growth, another person's choices, another person's emotional regulation, another person's consequences, the timing of someone else's lessons, every possible outcome in a stressful situation. And that doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring wisely. It means you stop taking on a role that hurts you and doesn't truly help the situation anyways. It means you stop confusing burden with love. And when a person begins to do that, they often feel a strange mix of like relief and discomfort. Relief because they can breathe, discomfort because they're not used to putting the load down, and that's normal. Now, sometimes people are so used to carrying too much that peace actually feels unfamiliar at first. But that doesn't mean the peace is wrong. It means the old burden became familiar. So here's a good practice. Ask yourself, what am I carrying right now that belongs to someone else? And what emotional weight have I picked up that was never mine? Or where am I acting like I'm responsible for an outcome that is bigger than my role? And then follow that with, what is mine to own here? And that second question, it matters too, because this is not about denial or avoidance. It's not, I don't care. It's not, none of this matters. What it is let me stop scattering myself by carrying everything and return to what is actually mine to tend to. That is healthy. That is mature. That is peaceful. That is strong. And honestly, it's one of the most life-changing things a person can learn, because the world will always hand you opportunities to overcarry. So the question is whether you keep saying yes, right? So this week, notice, where are you overloaded because you've picked up too much? Where are you mentally carrying people, situations, outcomes, and emotions that are not truly yours? And what would happen if you put some of that down? Not with anger, not with blame, not dramatically, just honestly. Because life gets lighter when you stop carrying what was never yours. And there's a concept of one day at a time. And that's even more important when life gets heavy. So, it's incredibly simple, but deeply powerful. The idea, one day at a time. And I've even heard it broken down to one moment at a time, right? So that phrase, it can sound, almost too simple, and people hear it and they think, yes, I know, one day at a time. But when life feels heavy and uncertain and emotional or overwhelming, this becomes more than a phrase. It becomes a lifeline. Because when people feel unsafe, they do not usually stay in today. They go into this imagined tomorrow. They go into next week. Worst case scenario. And what if this happens? What if that gets worse? What if I can't handle it? What if everything unravels? And that is what the mind does when it wants control. It time travels. It leaves the present moment and starts trying to solve the future in advance. And the problem is the body pays the price for that. The body tightens, the nervous system activates, the emotions intensify. all of these things that happen. Your eating can be affected, your patience gets worse, your presence disappears, the mind loops, sleep gets worse. And now a person is not only dealing with what's real today, they are also carrying 10 imagined tomorrows on their back. And that is too much for anybody, which is why coming back to today is such a powerful medicine. Not because the future doesn't matter, not because planning is bad, but because, and not because responsibility disappear, but because most people are not actually suffering only from what is happening today. They are suffering from everything their mind is piling up on top of today. And that's the part we have to notice. So I want you to think about this. How often are you actually dealing with today versus dealing with your fear of what might come next? And that's the big question, because sometimes today is manageable. Not easy, not painless, but manageable. But when the mind adds 5 future imagined scenarios, 3 imagined conversations, 4 possible disasters, and a whole story about what it all means, now the person feels crushed. And that is not weakness, that is overload. So one day at a time is not just some sweet little phrase, it's a deliberate act of returning to what is real now, returning to what you actually know, returning to what is actually yours today and yours to do today, returning to what your body, mind, and spirit can honestly hold in this moment. And that is calming. It doesn't fix everything instantly, but it stops you from multiplying your suffering. And that matters, right? So if life feels heavy right now, I want to offer, a few grounding questions. What is actually true today? What is actually being asked of me today? What do I actually need to do today? What am I adding mentally that does not belong to today? And that last one is big, because sometimes the thing wearing a person out is not today itself, is the mental pile on, the extra fear, the extra projection, the extra rehearsal, the extra responsibility, the extra pressure. So one day at a time is not laziness. It is wisdom. It is saying, I'm not going to abandon this moment in order to live inside imagined fear. I'm going to come back. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to notice what is here. I'm going to handle what is mine for today. And I'm going to stop trying to mentally survive a future that has not happened. And that is strength. And honestly, people who live with a lot of inner pressure often need permission to do this, because they think if they are not worried, they are being irresponsible. If they are not mentally preparing for every possibility, they are failing. If they are not tense, they are behind. But tension is not preparation. Worry is not wisdom, and pressure is not proof that you care. Sometimes peace is the wisest thing in the room. So here's a practice for this week. When you catch yourself spiraling into tomorrow, pause and gently say, come back to today. And then ask, was it mine to do today? What can wait? What is real right now? What am I mentally adding that does not belong here? And let that be enough for this moment. Because the truth is, many people do not need to solve their whole life today. They need to stop leaving today. And that is where peace begins. That is where clarity begins. And often that is where better choices begin too. So if life has been feeling heavy, overwhelming, or even uncertain, this is your reminder. You do not have to carry next week right now. You do not have to solve every possible outcome tonight. You do not have to mentally live in every future fear. So come back to today. Breathe. Handle what is yours in this day, and let today be enough. That is not small. That is profound. And as usual, I'd love to help you with this. So just check out me and my products and services at dawngrant.com. I'll see you in there.